I've always sort of been like outgoing as a person if you know me, but very shy when I first enter a situation. So like when I walk into a room, I'm always very quiet. But the internet provided a way for me to like talk to people that I didn't have to, be right there in person, and I didn't feel all the pressure. Um, so I started doing that and got on various sites in the DC area. And one of the sites I got on, there were a lot of people who were very nice, and so I started hanging out with them and meeting up with them. But one thing I noticed they all had in common was that they were all crystal meth users. I started doing it basically to hang out with them, because when you're hanging out with somebody who does meth, if you're not using it, and you've got like 4 hours and then you're asleep. Well, to hang out with them, you've got to be up all night. And I've always sort of had a bit of a savior complex that, I can help people. The reality of it was, I was escaping my own things to begin with by seeking into others' lives, how, I want to fix theirs so that I don't have to deal with mine. So it was almost like people were the drug to start out with. But then when I fell into a group of people that were using drugs, it was like I was getting a double dose. I had the drug of, interaction with complex people, but then I also had meth. And so put the two together, and it was just a nightmare for me. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. Where other kids sort of like rested a little bit in high school, or in the summers didn't do something, that there was sort of like downtime for them. And for me, there was never downtime. It was, from track practice to speech practice to play practice to weekend competitions. If there was a contest I wanted, if there was competition, I was right at the forefront, and people just expected it at the end. And, when I got to college, and it was this whole new world of learning, and I decided like that I wanted to stay there forever. And so I organized my life so that I could. I think I just wanted some time to do nothing, because I didn't know what that was like. And I wanted some time to learn how to like interact with people outside of those worlds. It's like I could be a part of a team, and I could make friends in class, but I didn't know how to like just go and be with people. That drug allowed me to do that very much so, to open up in front of people that I didn't know, and to sort of like be the life of the party, which I think everybody secretly wants to be the liked person. College sort of came to an end, and I didn't have a degree. There was just this like horrible disappointment in me that I had not, finished this, project that I had started. And my sort of backlash to that was, screw you people, I've done everything you've ever asked and more. Can't you just be okay with this one thing? And even to this day, like, if my father brings it up, like, I step out of the car. I can't even talk about it. It's one of those things that, you tell people you're sorry, and you can only say it once. It takes a lot to say that. And the relationships that have survived through all of this have been with basically only about 4 people who I said I was sorry, and they responded with, "There's no need to be sorry. Like, you were controlled by something else." And they've never said anything about it. Whereas some of my other friends have been like, "Oh, well, it's like that time you never showed up." And even when they crack jokes about it, I think people don't realize just how bad you feel when you come out of it, because you're fully aware of everything you did. I don't think it's like being a drunk where like, you can pass out and you can say things and you don't remember saying them. On my drug of choice, you remember it all too clearly. And you remember what you did while you were on it and what you chose to do instead of being with your friends. And so I think it's really important for friends and family I think it's important that you say you're sorry, but I think it's important that they hear that apology and that they let it go. Like most, I think, parents who were from the 60s, they did drugs themselves. And so for my, parents who used cocaine or marijuana or, whatever drug they were doing back then, to look at their kid and say not to use this, I think a lot of parents feel very hypocritical. So they sort of allow their children to experiment the way that they did, but they don't realize that the drugs are just a lot worse than they were back then. They thought what everybody else did, which was Adam can handle it. I put up a very good, strong shell that, came crashing down around me one night, and it surprised everybody around me that I had fallen apart, and, they never thought that was going to happen. But when I did and became more honest about everything, it just really shocked everybody. So when people would ask me, people did say, "Oh, well, do your parents know?" oh yeah, my parents know I use meth. But what they didn't know is how much I used. I think my dad needed to put his foot down and be like, you're not working, you've got friends moving in, people are doing drugs here all the time, and I mean, we were smoking meth in the house, and you have to be able to smell that. And we were up hours and hours and hours, and like we always had money, and it's just sort of like, I think he just needed to ask more questions would have been a good thing. And when I confronted him about it, he said, oh, you always just blew up and said, well, you don't want to talk about it. And my response was, well, what did you think I was going to do? The family's job and the friend's job is to express disappointment, is to tell them what they're doing is wrong, is to care for them, to not supply them with money all the time, to not put a roof over an addict's head, because I think you only delay the inevitable. When you enable your child to continue using drugs and you enable them to not work and you give them money, even if you think it's for food or clothes or whatever, addicts are very clever people. And they can come up with a billion different ways to take whatever you've given them and turn it into a drug. So I think, the best thing to do is just say, I'm not going to support this. And you tell them they got to get their own place. And as much as it hurts to kick a kid out, I think you just have to. Because reality comes very quickly to a child when their parents don't want to deal with them anymore. And it will be hard to, I think, see your kid on the street and to hear about your kid not having a place to live. But I think in the end, when your kid comes back, the feeling will be that much greater. And there is always the fear that you will lose them in that process. But I think the important thing to remember, like as a parent, is that that's not your fault or your responsibility or even something that you can prevent. If a drug is going to take someone, it's going to take someone. And only they can prevent that.